Hi everyone, I'm Karen from Sew and Save, and today we are finally going to start, yay, our Fair Isle Block of the Month. I'm so happy to have been starting this and working on it again. I forgot how much fun it was to do and how easy the blocks were and how fun rulers are to use. So if you have never used some of the Studio 180s, or it's been a while since you've used them, you don't know how much fun is in store for you, because let me tell you, this is a lot of fun. So we're going to do the first block and we're just going to get right into it. So every month you're going to get the fabric that you need to create the block for that month. This month we're going to use the corner beam ruler. Ta-da! The corner beam ruler. And we're going to create these corner beam squares. So you're going to make 16 of this square and 24 of that block. Fun, fun, fun. So the fabrics that you're going to get this month are fabrics 1, fabric 3, and fabric 17. 17 is always your background. So that's going to be your background fabric. As we go along, you might want to put your fabrics in the little R on your sheet, so it will help you remember which fabric is which as we go along. So it's a little bit hard. It'll be easy for you because you're just going to get what you need and you're going to know exactly which ones those are. So it's a little hard to tell from the picture and looking at the fabrics which number is what, but we've got that all taken care of for you because we're just going to give you the fabric you need every month and you're not going to have to figure that out. So this month you're going to do the corner beam blocks. Like I said, you're going to have 3 fabrics and you're going to use the corner beam ruler. And I'm going to show you step by step how to make the blocks. Actually, I'm going to actually even show you how to cut out the fabric for your blocks and how to sew them together. The first thing that you're going to do is take your fabrics over to your ironing board, give everything a nice spritz of best press, and press it dry. Because we have a lot of bias seams in here and we stabilize that fabric as much as we can before we get started. Batiks are nice to use because they don't stretch as much as regular fabric. They do have more stability, but we're going to help ourselves out even more by giving it just a little spritz of best press as we go along. So go and do that and then come back and I'm going to show you how to cut out your blocks. You're going to cut out your corner beam centers, these guys, and then your side triangles. So I will show you how to do all of that in just a minute. So go prep your fabric and come back and we'll start cutting. Now you have all of your pieces cut. Fabric 1, you have 16 5 by 5 inch squares. Fabric 3, you have 24 5 by 5 inch squares. And fabric 17, you have 4 5-inch by width of fabric strips. So we're going to set your cream fabric aside for right now. Not going to work with that quite yet. Take your stacks of 5-inch squares and stack them in sets of 4. So each one of these has 4 5-inch squares in them. Alrighty, I'm going to kind of move this aside and we're going to look at the ruler for 1 second. So this ruler has quite a few markings on it and you're looking at it and you're going, I just don't understand this. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. All right, we're only going to right now be concentrating on this kind of triangle portion of the ruler at this point in time. This part we will use later on. What's going to be nice is we're going to make our blocks and then we're going to use this section of the ruler to square it up and cut it down to the size that we need. So every block that we make in this quilt is bigger and then we use our rulers to cut them down, square them up, and they're going to be just beautiful. You're going to be so excited when you see your blocks. So right now we're going to concentrate, like I said, on this section of the ruler. We're going to take it, I'm going to kind of leave it on the white paper for right now so it's a little bit easier to see. It's a little bit hard to see the markings on the dark mat. So that's why I'm kind of just using it on the ruler or on the white paper for right now. I'm going to take my square and I'm going to lay it down on my cutting board. I am going to use what they're calling the center beam trim 1. And if you look on your instructions, it tells you to look at that number. And so we're going to be looking at center beam trim 1, and then later on we're going to flip the ruler and we're going to look at center beam trim 2. And those are the dotted lines, because you're going to kind of, and I did this on my first time I did this block as well, I kind of concentrated on this dark line because that dark line feels like the line you should line something up on and trim. But you don't want to do that. If you do that, it's going to be wrong. You'll make your first cut and you'll realize it, and then you'll be sad. So use your center beam trim 1 and your 4-inch finished unit. And it says cut strips and squares 5 inches. So since your squares are 5 inches, you're going to line this up on the 4-inch finished line. You would not line it up on the 4.5 or the 4 or the 3.5, because that would mean that you would need either a 4.5-inch square or a 5.5-inch square. So since you cut 5-inch squares, you're going to line up the bottom of your square like this down here on the 4-inch finished unit, and then you're going to line the side of your square up with the dotted line that's marked center beam trim 1. So you're going to do that and line those two up. This ends up going right into the point of your square, and it kind of gives you a little diagonal line here. So actually, since I'm just going to cut straight through this because it'll be easier for you to see. And I'm not going to move this anyway. So I'm just going to cut through all the way through my paper and everything. Not going to matter. It's just easier for you to see. So I'm going to make that trim. Alrighty? I'm not going to move my fabric at all. Leave your fabric sitting where it's at. You can get rid of this little triangle piece. And then you're simply going to turn your ruler. Now we turn your ruler so that the center beam trim 2 line lines up with the line that you just cut. So you're going to kind of trim this over. And this is your point is going to line up here in your point. And this center beam trim 2 is going to line up right on that line that you just cut. And then you're going to trim this part off again. And you're going to have what looks like the bottom of a bow tie, of a tie almost. And that's what you're going to end up with. You're going to cut all of these pieces exactly the same. So I'm going to get rid of my little cut piece of paper now, and let's do it again. On my cutting board, I'm going to line up the trim beam 1 line and the 4-inch finished unit line right on the corner of my 5-inch block. I'm going to trim that, get rid of that, line up my beam, center beam 2 line right up on the line that I just cut, and trim again. Ta-da! You can do this, right? Super simple. All right, now you're going to go and trim all of these and then come back and I'll show you what to do with your cream strips. Okay? Have fun with this. Watch that line. Center beam 1, center beam 2. That's all you have to remember. Give it a trim and come back and we'll see you in a couple minutes. Now it's time to cut your background strip, and you have your 5-inch by width of fabric strip in front of you. First thing you want to do is trim off the selvage edge of your strip. So I'm just going to use the ruler to do that, kind of come in and make sure that I'm getting through both layers of fabric and trimming off that selvage. Line up the top of my ruler with the top of my strip and trim off the selvage. Then I'm going to turn my strip around and work from this side. Remember that line that I said, don't pay attention to, don't look at? Well, now you're going to look at it. The lines that you're going to look at are your side triangle 1, which is this dark line, and then over here, your side triangle 2, and that's a diagonal line. First, you're going to line up the side triangle 1, that solid line, and the little tip of your ruler on your edge of your fabric. So that side triangle one is going to like run right straight down the side, and the little tip is going to be right up at the tip. You want that squared off piece on top, so that when we sew these together later, you'll have that little extra 1/4 inch spot up there to line things up. I'm going to trim that, and I have one set. I laid this with both of my right sides together. My strip is folded in half, so when I cut two, I'm going to have two triangle pieces. One is going to go on the left side of your block, and one will go on the right side. So you'll have a right and left. You're going to end up cutting 40 sets of these. All right, so I've cut that. So now I have to turn my ruler so that I can cut the other diagonal on my strip. So now I'm going to look at that side triangle 2 line that goes diagonal, and then there's a dark little line here so that I get that 1/4 inch on this one as well. And I will take it in and we'll line up. It says second trim, so that's going to line up on the bottom. My seam line here is going to line up right there. So that side triangle 2 line is going to line up on the diagonal. That little second trim is going to line up right on the bottom. And now I'm cutting up straight. So now I'm back to where I was before. I'm just going to turn my ruler so that side triangle 1 line is up against the straight line. The little 1/4 inch is up on the top. You'll have your 4 inch running across the bottom just like before, and you're going to trim there. And you're going to continue turning. Now I'm going to turn again just to show you one more time. You're going to line up the side triangle trim number 2 right there, that little second trim line at the bottom, and cut. And you will continue doing this until you have 40 triangles, or actually 40 sets of triangles. Remember, you need a right and a left. You need 40 sets of these little triangles, and each time you cut, you will cut 2. So you will cut 1 set every time you cut. So get 40 of these, and then we're going to start sewing. It's very exciting. It's a lot of fun to put together. So pretty easy to cut. Remember side triangle 1 and side triangle 2. So get cutting, and I'll see you in a minute. Alrighty, now we have our side triangles cut. We have our center beams all cut, and now we're ready to sew them together. Very exciting. So it's a little weird. You're not quite sure how to sew these triangles onto this corner beam. And the easiest way that I can tell you to remind you how to sew these together is that the small sides go to the small sides, and the wide edges go to the wide edges. Just like that, so that when you lay those together, it looks like a square. If you lay them out the opposite way, you're going to end up with something that looks like this, and it doesn't look like a square at all. It looks like a misshapen rectangle. So small ends go to the small end, large ends go to the large end. So you can start on either side that you like. Start and lay your fabrics together so that you have about 1/4 inch between here and here when you sew, and 1/4 inch left over down here. Alrighty, and you're going to go sew all of those edges. I sew all one side, and then I come back and I sew all of the other side. Then we're going to press either toward the triangles or open, and I actually pressed mine open. So I liked that nice flat seam. So when I press my seam open, I shorten up my stitch length a little bit. My machine defaults to a 2.4. I'm going to back that up to 2 and press my seams open, and I'll have a nice, beautiful flat seam. So go and sew one side, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how to sew the other side. Okay, see you in a minute. All right, so let's review what we've sewn. We sewed our side triangle onto our center beam. using a 1/4 inch seam, and since I'm pressing my seams open, I dropped my stitch length down to 2, and I also used kind of an off white, kind of a tan thread on this instead of my regular white. Let me see what I've got on here. I have Aurifil number 2312. 2312. That's the Aurifil color that I used. It's this color right here. Kind of a tannish, beigey color. So instead of the bright white. Looks a lot nicer. Kind of just blends right in. So a 1/4 inch seam, drop your stitch length to 2 and stitch him on. Press your seam open, and then we have this. And this is what your black looks like on the other side. Let me pull my little cut up piece of white fabric here so you can kind of see the back of that. So you can see what the back of my seam looks like. I have a little thing that sticks out there, a little point that sticks out there. I have a little flat section up here. That's all perfect. Don't worry about it if it looks a little kittywampus, if it looks a little funny. So I've done that, pressed my seam open. Now I will add my next side. So now I have laid my next side triangle on the angle of the corner beam or the center beam, and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch in, and you can see this little guy sticking out. And I've extended this little triangle point out about a 1/4 inch past my center beam block. Alrighty, so go and stitch those and then press those seams open, and when you come back you will end up with this block right here. Alrighty, now you've got that all sewed. Now it's time to square it up and cut it down. So you can see mine's a little kittywampus up here, and I've got pieces, these guys are sticking out down below my center beam here. That is all just fine. What we're going to be looking at is our triangle, our little teepee. I kind of call it a teepee that goes right through the center of our block. And we are now going to use the ruler to trim up that block. I'm going to pull this back over again because we're going to start by looking at the point, and we're going to trim that point off first. So we're going to look at our ruler, and our ruler on this point over here where this whole great big teepee kind of comes to a point over here, that's what we're going to look at first. We're going to line the teepee in the ruler up with the teepee on our block. How does that sound? So you're going to line up that angle, that big triangle teepee, up with the triangle center of your block, which is your center beam. So you're going to line that right up with your center beam. The point of your block is going to match up with the point of that ruler. And from the point of your block, your center beam, that purple in the center, to the end of your ruler will be a 1/4 inch. So in the end, you're not going to be cutting that point off because everything is too big and you're going to trim it all down. So we're going to trim these two sides first. All right, I'm going to slide my ruler out of there, or my paper out of there, and line my ruler back up, lining my teepee back up with the teepee in the center of my block, and I'm going to trim both sides, the right side and the top. Alrighty, now you can see I have a nice 1/4 inch between that point and my edge, so that when I sew my seam, I am not going to cut that point off. It's going to be beautiful. Now we're going to cut this other side that's all kind of little kittywampus off. So now we're going to take the ruler. We're not going to turn the ruler at all. We're going to cut this down to 4.5 inches. So there's different things that you can look at on this part of the ruler as well. And we're going to point those out. Okay, I'm just going to rip that off. There we go. On your ruler, you're going to be looking at this 4.5 inch line here. You're going to be looking at the 4 inch kind of point here. And then there's some angled lines over here that you will look at when you lay your ruler down. Alrighty, so let me lay this on top of my block and we'll take a look at all of those little points that I just showed you. So we're going to line up the outside of our block. This is the edge that we just trimmed. We're going to line up the edge that we just trimmed with the 4.5 inch line on our ruler. And already you can see that I have some fabric that I can trim off there and make that nice and square. All right, so I'm lining up my 4.5 with that. And then there's some lines here, these little lines here. Those will line up with your center beam of your block. So you can kind of see mine line up right here and right there. Alrighty, and then you also have this little 4-inch, this little 4 teepee, that kind of lines up right where it belongs to. So all of those little points line up just so nice. And then you're going to take and trim off the right side and across the top. And you have a perfect center beam block. Isn't that awesome? So you're going to end up with 24 with the fabric 3 and 16 with fabric number 1. So go forth and sew. Have fun with this. If you have any questions, give me a call, email me, text me, stop in the store, and I'm happy to help you at any point. So have fun with this, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.